Imagine being labeled an enemy of your own country, your family sent to internment camps, confined behind barbed wire. Despite all this, you are asked to fight for the very country that doubts your loyalty. Would you fight to defend a nation that's taken your freedom away? That's the question thousands of Japanese Americans faced during World War II. This is the story of the 442nd Infantry Regiment, a group of Japanese Americans who fought bravely during World War II. Despite facing prejudice and suspicion at home, these soldiers went on to become the most decorated unit in American military history. Their story is one of loyalty, sacrifice, and a battle for acceptance. But how did they end up on the front lines of war while their families were held behind fences? Let's go back to the beginning. After the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941, anti-Japanese sentiment in the United States hit an all-time high. Over 120,000 Japanese Americans, most of them US citizens, were forced from their homes and into internment camps under Executive Order 9066, branded as enemy aliens. Their loyalty was questioned. But despite this, when the US government reversed its decision in 1943 and allowed Japanese Americans to enlist, more than 33,000 volunteered to fight. The 442nd Infantry Regiment was formed in 1943, and it was unique in one critical way. Nearly every soldier was a Nisei, second-generation Japanese American. They weren't just fighting a foreign enemy, they were also fighting the prejudices of their fellow countrymen. The unit adopted the motto, "Go for broke," a Hawaiian gambling phrase that meant to risk everything. And for these men, it wasn't just a saying, it was their mission. The soldiers of the 442nd had something to prove, not only to themselves, but to a country that had questioned their loyalty. While the men of the 442nd Infantry Regiment trained to fight abroad, their families remained imprisoned in internment camps, barbed wire and guard towers reminding them of the country's distrust. The 442nd soldiers faced a unique challenge. Unlike other soldiers in the US military, they were fighting two battles, one on the front lines and one against the prejudice they encountered both at home and within the military itself. Despite this, the soldiers of the 442nd proved their loyalty time and again. They weren't just fighting for their country, they were fighting for the dignity of their families and for the right to call themselves Americans. One soldier wrote, "I fight because if I don't, who will stand up for my family? Who will defend their right to be free?" This sense of purpose gave the men of the 442nd an unshakable resolve. They weren't just soldiers, they were protectors of a dream. The 442nd didn't just fight, they excelled. In 1944, they were deployed to Italy, where they took part in some of the fiercest fighting of the war. But it was in the Vosges mountains of France that they truly made their mark in history. The most decorated unit in US military history, the 442nd accomplished what many thought impossible. The battle that defined the 442nd was the rescue of the Lost Battalion. Trapped by German forces in the Vosges Mountains, 275 soldiers from the Texas 141st Infantry Regiment were surrounded with no way out. The 442nd was tasked with a nearly impossible mission to break through enemy lines and save them. The Nisei soldiers advanced through dense forests, facing artillery fire and dug-in German troops at every step. The battle was brutal. After days of relentless combat, the 442nd broke through, rescuing 211 soldiers, but at a tremendous cost. Over 800 casualties were suffered in the rescue attempt. To this day, it remains one of the most heroic rescues in US military history. The commander of the Lost Battalion later said, "I owe my life to those men." Their bravery in battle proved that loyalty is measured by actions, not appearances, and the 442nd's go for broke attitude became legendary across the US military. By the end of World War II, The 442nd Infantry Regiment was not just a military unit, they were legends. Despite their small numbers, they had earned more medals and honours than any other unit of their size in US history. With over 18,000 awards, including 21 Medals of Honor, 4,000 Purple Hearts and 7 Presidential Unit citations, the 442nd had proven beyond any doubt where their loyalty lay. Their bravery did not go unnoticed. After the war, their exploits were celebrated not just by the military, but by the nation. Yet for many, the recognition came too late. For decades, the contributions of these soldiers were overlooked, even forgotten by many. It would take over 50 years before all 21 Medals of Honor were finally awarded. In 2000, President Bill Clinton presented the long overdue honors, saying, "Rarely has a nation been so well served by a people it has so ill-treated." This moment was a final acknowledgement of the valor and sacrifice of these men. One of the recipients, Senator Daniel Inouye, continued his service long after the war, becoming the first Japanese American to serve in the US Congress. His bravery on the battlefield and his legacy as a public servant made him one of the most iconic members of the 442nd. The legacy of the 442nd Infantry Regiment is not just one of military heroism, but of social change. Their bravery on the battlefield forced America to reckon with its treatment of Japanese Americans and laid the groundwork for future civil rights movements. How did the actions of these men help reshape America's views on race and loyalty? In the decades following the war, the story of the 442nd became a symbol of resilience and sacrifice. It was a story of loyalty to a country that had doubted them. In 1988, President Ronald Reagan signed the Civil Liberties Act, which issued a formal apology and provided reparations to Japanese Americans who had been interned during the war. President Reagan acknowledged the role the 442nd played in this moment, stating, "No amount of money can undo the damage, but we can acknowledge it and learn from it." As one survivor of the camp said, "The courage of the men who fought for this country paved the way for us all. They gave us more than just medals, they gave us back our dignity." The 442nd Infantry Regiment didn't just change the course of a war, they helped change the course of history.